pictures of school children, and I look around and I see several of my classmates that are in those pictures along with me, so it's really great to see John Divining and Steve Wallow, and Ginny was way ahead of us, so she's not in these pictures, but it's really great. I would want to give due credit to our historian, Jean Hankins, because this is not my original research. She had smoothed through all of our archives and found these wonderful picture boards, which we had done, and then provided a lot of photographs for going into the PowerPoint presentation. So she did a lot of that work to garner all this information and give me documents, one of her chronologies of events in education. There was something that surfaced from my mother's work and my sister Ann's mother, talking about schools, because my mother taught at the Gore School for 4 years. So it's all of this, all of these things that show up at our door that really make the archives fairly rich. So when we go to do a program, we have a good base of information so keep it coming. If you have documents you think you'd like to leave with us, we assure you good care. So, and I also need to thank David Heyer for doing Jean started with the PowerPoint presentation, and as she says, David Heyer can slick it up very nicely. And so we thank David.
With some help from David Heyer.
Yes, exactly. So, so off we go. If you think about Otisfield and its early history, and we won't spend a lot of time on this, we'll get to school pictures and so forth. The first settlers came up through here, kind of from the Sebago Lake region and up through the Jugtown Plain. Those of you who are walkers with us, you walk the Jugtown Road that goes from Oak Hill to Eads Falls, which originally was part of the town of Otisfield. And so they came up in that direction, probably towards Oak Hill, and Benjamin Patch ended up landing on Bell Hill Road. He was one of our earliest settlers after George Pierce, who was the engineer, that's not the right word, he came up with the surveyor, who came up to lay out the lots for Otisfield. And they're all those lots are there and numbered in Bill Spur's book. So I'm sure a lot of you have seen that page where you can say, oh, that's lot 45, I'm on range 10, lot 2, or whatever. So that information is there. The second settler that appeared was David Ray, and the story goes that he got to Bell Hill, probably parked in with Benjamin Hatch, who must have had some kind of a shelter or a log cabin or something up, and then he bushwhacked down through the woods, because that's all that was here, to Rayville. And he set up shop in Rayville, started a lumber mill, so we can have boards for building, and built a house. And the very first school in Otisfield was not a town school, it was a private school. And it was built by David Ray, and he built a small wood structure on the back of his log cabin. And that's the house where Sharon Matthews lives. And it was on the back side of whatever was the initial building. It certainly doesn't look like it did now. And he did that to educate his own daughters. And he had 2 girls. One was already married, but no matter, she wanted to go to school. So his 2 girls went to school, along with a few other children as they arrived in Otisfield. And that really was the first school. Had no support from the town. It was David Ray's problem. He hired a teacher, actually a teacher, Captain William Swan, to direct the school. So things rolled along, and Otisfield was incorporated in 1789 as a Massachusetts town. Remember, we were still Massachusetts at that point in time until 1820. So in April of 1798, at the first town meeting held after the incorporation, they proposed an article to the town meeting warrant to provide some funding for schools. There was not much interest in doing that, and the item was passed over. They probably had other things they felt they needed to do first. A year later, however, the town meeting in April of 1799, voted to raise $100 for the ensuing year to take care of schools. And this was the first record of the town appropriating any money to support education in Otisfield. From that time, the 1798-99 period up to 1800, there were the first 5 schools that were built in town. One was Bell Hill, a school at Spurs Corner, a school at Scribner Hill, and we'll see pictures of all of these later. And 2 schools in what they called Harrison, which then was part of Otisfield in a sense. And Jean and I thought that that probably was one in the area of Bolster's Mills, on which side of the river, who knows. And maybe at Ryfield, here at Otisfield, there is a well-known bridge there, and that was a developing community, so there was probably a school there. So the first 5 schools were just about 1800, a couple of years shy of that. A little after that, the town divided into school districts, and each district had a supervisor, not a superintendent, but a supervisor, and their job was to, number 1, be a member of the town's school committee, and they were expected to manage the school, hire a teacher, and pay them, only they didn't have to pay them out of their own pocket. The town, remember that $100 for 5 schools, they probably got a little of that. So, and if you think about what teachers got paid in 1799, it was about $1.25 a week. And that was for the women. And the women usually, the schools operated by 2 sessions, 2 terms, one in the summer, and they were 8 to 10 weeks in length. And that probably, you think, why in the summer? Or off in the summer, but they needed probably their young people home on the farm spring and fall. So summer was a good time to send your kids to school. So they had a summer session, usually handled by women, and a winter term about the same length, 8, 9, 10 weeks. And these schools sometimes operated and sometimes they didn't. If a school didn't have enough students to put it together, they might send the one child off to another school or whatever. So it wasn't quite as consistent and as regulated, certainly, as it is now. Early on, when Massachusetts was still running the show, the Massachusetts General Court Massachusetts had decided lots that would be reserved for the ministry. So there would be a church lot and school lots. It might be 15, it might be 32, it might be whatever. They made some assumptions about where those lots should be. And then as settlement started to happen, those probably didn't work quite right. So they changed some of those lots to different areas as they needed to. But they were still, Massachusetts still had their foot on those lots. And so in 1811, Massachusetts General Court agreed that Otisfield could sell those lots that were originally allotted to ministry and schools, and that became the first real resource for schools to use. So it started to create a permanent fund for ministry and schools. So that was that. Then 1820 rolls along and Maine separates from Massachusetts, and we're then instead of Maine. Started to run our own show a little bit. So that's 1820. We're a state, we're separated. I shouldn't say we're a state. We're separated and it's called Maine. And in 1839, there were several new schools that were built. Now, remember there had been some in 98 and 99, and they likely were log cabins. They weren't very sophisticated schools. So that was in 99. In 1839, they built 3, I think, new brick houses. So you've all seen these brick houses, and the perfect example is the one we still have, which is the Bell Hill Schoolhouse, up beside Bell Hill Meeting House. So those were built in 1839 at Bell Hill on the Gore, which was then attached to Otisfield early on, and that's that wedge that didn't quite fit in either township, so they called it the Gore, and it belonged to us. So Bell Hill, the Gore, and Spurs Corner, and they were all brick houses at that point, and they all look very much like the Bell Hill Schoolhouse. Very, very similar designs. So we have pictures of those, so we'll get to those. In 1840, we found a note, that's the year after these were built, that when they built those, apparently they replaced the fireplaces that had been in the previous school with wood stoves. So if you think about that, in 1840, we had no electricity, so lighting was wonderful, I'm sure, and the heat would have come from fireplaces, and that's warm in the front and not so hot in the back. So, and again, it became a tough little kid to go to another school in 1840. And I shouldn't say as a result, but at the same time, in 1847, less than half of all Maine children aged 8 to 15 or even up to into 20s were not attending school. Less than half were staying home, were going to school. So 1864, we're in the middle of the Civil War. Maine passed a compulsory education law saying that all children ages 8 to 15 needed to attend school at least 16 weeks. That's 80 days. Who knows if that recommendation was always happening, but at least there was some regulation starting. 1864, same year, the first teachers college opened in Farmington State Teachers College. It's a 2-year program. I think all 3 of our elementary school teachers attended either Gorham or Farmington for that early teacher education training. And we were awful lucky, in my view, to have had such access to these smart women who were allowed to teach school or maybe take care of children, or whether there were a lot of professional level jobs for women in 1864. So I think we were very lucky with the teachers we had. They were smart, they were educated, and they took very good care of us, I believe. So then, we had this district system, as I mentioned earlier, with a supervisor who took care of things. That ended in about the turn of the century, 1893. They got rid of the district system. That brought with it some benefits that meant that then the towns had to treat all the schools equally. In the past, they allotted money based on how many students were there. So if you had 3 students, you got this much money. If you had 9 students, you got this much money. So at that point, that all schools needed to be treated equally. The state had to supply the textbooks, and there hadn't been a lot of textbooks prior to that. There wasn't a lot of paper prior to that. People didn't have these nice, pads of paper and whatever. So probably students were using slates. And the states also began limited sharing of educational expenses. We fight that battle still, do we not? About how much the state is going to contribute to the educational system. All right, in 1913, we got done with the dates. Maine required teachers to be certified, so certification was a requirement as of the early 1900s. And in 1966, Otisfield joined SAD 17, which brought about a real change in our school systems, and we still have, fortunately, local elementary schools. So I think with that, we should start to talk a little bit with the PowerPoint of the schools and where they were and what went on there. So are you doing this, David, or Jean, with your control? Are we ready to show you? Yeah, so let's start with Bell Hill School. there it is in all its glory, 1839. People you know went there. Betty Goss went there, Howard Dyer went there, Dorothy Lombard went there, Gordon Pico went there, along with many others. And we had lots of interviews that Ethel and Jean did to get oral histories from most of those people I mentioned, if not all. We have records of how they said things went for them in school. That is the Bell Hill Schoolhouse. It has since 1890, it closed its doors in 1940. And then, do you remember when the school, we bought the school from the town for $1 or something? When was that? Do you remember? Okay. Somewhere in the milieu, the town decided we would be a good protector of the Bell Schoolhouse, which I think we had been. We totally restored the schoolhouse, I think around 2013-14, and got it listed on the National Register of Historic Places, and it remains there. We also entertain Otisfield 4th grade students every year annually now. They come for morning with Miss Teacher Jean Cottle and Miss Teacher Ann Johnstone, and they have a good day, a good morning at Bell Hill Schoolhouse. So it's nice to know that that is the one schoolhouse that has survived the whole rigors that still exists. The Bell Hill Schoolhouse is another photo, that's it, from 1890. I don't recognize the participants. Slide 4 shows, we have a list. We go over here afterwards, we have a list of who's there. And for the most part, we have most of the names on a lot of these. So slide 4 is the Spurs Corner School. And if you look at it, the brick looks very much like the Bell Hill Schoolhouse. Sits across from the Spurs Corner Church. And that was built in 1871, as you can see. And the congregation up at Bell Hill left the Bell Hill Meeting House in 1887 and moved on down and started to participate down where the fields were flatter and not quite so rocky. And so there was a move there. So that school sat there for quite some time, and we'll show you the next version when it comes up. The Gore Schoolhouse, slide 5, is an interesting picture. Yeah. You don't see the whole schoolhouse, but you see enough to know that it looks exactly like the others. It looks exactly like the Spurs Corner one. And that happens to be the teacher, third person up on the left, who was climbing the ladder with the kids. And there are children up on top of the roof beside the bell structure, and kids climbing the roof. Did we worry about liability then? I don't think so much. So that was school days then, and it looks a little riotous and probably quite fun. So, where was it? What?
Where was it located?
The Gore School?
Yes, please.
It was located on the Gore Road right by Anderson Hill Road as that goes off down, and it was on, if you're going towards Brett's Farm, it was on the left. And there it stayed until it was replaced in 1922 with a wood frame building. And that building's still there, and it's owned by Crystal McKay. We'll get to that, okay.
Hey, Callie,
Yes.
I noticed that all the pictures except the Bell Hill School have a bell tower.
That's right. Well, we had a bigger bell at Bell Hill, right beside it at the Bell Hill Meeting House. So that might have been, but we still have a nice, wooden handle, this thing, like a big bell that you can make a pretty good clatter with. So we're at the Gore Schoolhouse. Then slide 6 is the Scribner Hill School. And that stood near the intersection of Ivory Hill Road, if you all know where that is, and the Scribner Hill Road. So where Ivory Hill and Scribner Hill meet And I think Howard Diane told us it was a little on beyond that, but not much. And probably on the right-hand side of Bell Hill Road. So let's see, 1857, even though the other places in 1840 replaced their fireplaces with stoves, Scribner Hill did not. So they were still with a fireplace, according to Lydia Spur, who was Bill Spur's history of Otisfield, Bill Spur's mother. And she said that she was a student there, so they were still the fireplace. East Otisfield School, slide 7. Locally known at that point, East Otisfield was referred to as Pugleyville. Because we all grew up good, right, Donnie?
Tell me a story about that later.
All right, we'll ask you to. We're not sure when that school was constructed, but it sits right across from the mouth of the Cobb Hill Road. It's a little white house with a fence in front, and I think that shed is still right there beside it, and it's where Lori Phillips and
John?
lived. So I think the shed is still there, right?
Yeah.
Building.
The toilet was a outhouse and the passageway going out past that.
Yeah.
That's how we actually.
This is kind of interesting because I talk about something else in a minute here, that a school was bought up by a Kemp person, family member. But if you look, the big white building right up there is the East Otisfield General Store. Can't tell you right at that point if that was owned by L.S.R. Stone or Chester Lamb or the Beans, or not the Beans, it was later, earlier than that. And this over here is the structure of the mill, the Kemp's Mill. That's the sluiceway that came through the mill pond and they hauled them up through there. And that building burned, and I don't remember when that was, but so it's an interesting picture of early Otisfield Village. And we have several of those in our archives that are really clear and you can see well. So my grandmother Paul taught there. I didn't know that until I read some of these sheets, but she taught there for a long time. I remember that house when Rose Hamlin owned it. I don't know if you bought it at what point you bought it, but she lived there, and her granddaughter was Sandra Grover Dunn. Sandra Grover was a local girl. She's in one of these pictures. And I used to go in there with her to visit with her grandmother, and she'd give us cookies and whatever. So, rubbing inside that. Okay, and so that lasted until about 1931. The town decided that it would build a new school, and it sold, or gave that one sold probably. And the new school was that school. Do we have that picture? Not yet. Yeah, building 31, and it was a one-room schoolhouse in East Otisfield then. And that's where I and my sister Ann and Johnny went there. Steve, you probably did because you were a little younger than I. So that faced uphill, looking at the Rayville Road, and it's that portico that's on there. You'll see when we show you the pictures bringing the schools together. They removed that, and it's pretty much as it was. And that part of the building is what became the right side of the current town office, where Rick St. John and Ann Pastor have their office spaces. So that, where they are, is the old East Otisfield Schoolhouse. With some modifications, but you know, not a lot on the structure itself, but inside, clearly somewhat different. Okay, a number of my family attended there, and you'll see their pictures over here. My mother, my aunt Nellie, my Uncle John, my it out, and probably other people's as well. Then the next school we visit is Rayville, and it looks again a little bit chaotic. Jean's assumption is that the boys are throwing rocks at the bell. We don't know if we know that for sure. And you told me about the car belonged to who?
Visiting nurses.
The visiting nurses were there visiting. And so, I don't
It's
know.
not an official school photo, that's why they're not lined up.
Yeah. Okay, the Rayville School, and Ginny knows about the Rayville School, right?
I went there once, 1 year anyway.
Yep.
I have a cruise tour on.
Yeah. So it's been kind of moved around, you know, you'd have thought you'd gone to East Otisfield, but maybe they were full, so you went to Rayville. You, the older kids, you could go to Rayville, who knows? But it was on the Jackson Brook Road. If you go around the corner past Sharon's house, Sharon Matthews' house, between that and the brick house, there used to be a little road that went in there called the Jackson Brook Road. So that is where that's set. And Gordon Pico said this was functioning as a school at least until 1942 when he attended. He was at Bell Hill until 1940. And then apparently that's when Bell Hill closed, so he was at Jackson Brook School after that, at the Rayville School. And later that was moved down to become the house at the end of the Rayville Road. If you're heading out Rayville, it's on the right. And so they pulled the little schoolhouse down there and it became a domicile, number 6 Rayville Road. And that was purchased by Henry Hamilton's family. And I remember when we were in school, Henry and his sister Pamela would walk down the hill to the school. I think it may have been the consolidated school because he was a bit younger than we were. But they were up there, that was their family that had that house. And for a while it looked just like the school. And then of course it got added to or whatever. And it's still there. So that schoolhouse still exists. Waterville, oh, Swampville. Did we skip Waterville? Do I have my line? We'll talk about Swampville.
We don't have Woodville.
Oh, we don't have that as a picture.
We don't have Woodville.
We'll talk about Waterville, but Swampville School. I think it's charming. I think it's wonderful. And we have pictures of it over here with some students, I believe. And Jean got a very interesting piece, one of these things that shows up again, from a woman whose family bought that schoolhouse after it was closed as a school. So Swampville Road, you know, goes, if you go up Bell Hill, there's a left up at kind of the top of the backside. And it goes out by the big old white building with a red roof that was close to and perhaps used at some point as the town farm. And if you go all the way to the end of that road where it butts Bolster's Mills Road, that is where that school's set. And there's an extension of that, so there's the Swampville Road, Bolster's Mills Road, and then another road directly across. So it was kind of at that intersection that Swampville School was in. According to this nice long piece that was sent to G in 2002, in 1941, first of all, the school sat at a pasture owned by Frank and Lonnie Smith. And so they provided the place for the school, and they also lodged the school teacher. And then when that was done, in 41, Calvin and Mabel Smith purchased the school from the town for $400, so the price of the school was going up. They moved it onto the beginning of the Bolster's Mills, on Bolster's Mills Road, just the beginning of the village somewhere, and moved into it in 1948 and stayed there. And it's now, they're both gone, and their daughter Hazel Ward was the one who sent the message, and she owns the house now. It's still in its original condition in a lot of ways. The wood floors are still there, the narrow board ceiling, is still there. The original wainscoting is still there. Wainscoting, I don't know just how to say that. And so that was in 2002 that she wrote that letter. So whether that's still there now or not, I don't know. Then, next one. South Otisfield, commonly known as Dunkertown. South Otisfield is down by past where the Scribner Hill Road comes out, and those are some of the people that live down there. This is Eve Jolson, those of you who remember Eve Jolson, Ellsworth Scribner, some others I don't remember or know, but so it's by close to the Forest Edwards Road where it leaves Powhatan, and probably on the other side of the road, and that building is, that's an interesting past. After it was closed as a school, we had an artist in the area named Jean Randall.
Yes.
Although a lot of people didn't know her. She was an artist and she purchased it and used it where it sat, I believe, as a studio. But that building is now gone.
And Karen, I just interrupt and say it's also used briefly as a church.
That's right. And which one?
First as a Baptist church and second as an Advent church, Advent Christian church.
And I never knew we had churches in South Otisfield. I wasn't around then. Okay. Anything else about memories from that, anybody? Okay. We're back to the Gore, and this is the second Gore building, if not the third. And they changed from brick, and again, you can see that same portico that you see on the East Otisfield building. So again, with the windows along and two windows on the end, they seem to have a style for those buildings. And that is the building my mother, Estelle Pottle, at that point, Estelle Pottlestone, taught 4 years in that school. And we talked about the women taught in the summer, the men taught in the winter. Well, when my mother taught, she was teaching in the winter. And she had to get there early before the kids did to start the stove, start the fire. Be sure the kids would be when she was going up the Gore Road. And many of you know what that's like in the winter. And her model, whatever, Ford, got mired, and she walked the rest of the way. Just about froze her legs, I guess. But she didn't dare not go, because if the students had gotten there, and there was no way to get in or approach, so you know, it was kind of an interesting job to be a teacher. Those days, that was in the 1920s.
You might point out that slave picture at this point.
That's the mode of, did you all see it from there? That's the mode of, one of the modes for transportation. It wasn't like there were 3 cars sitting in every driveway if you had a driveway. You kind of had to figure out the way to school. And their plan was that students wouldn't be much more than a mile away from school so that they could walk when it was walkable. But that actually is a picture of our family. And I think it's my Uncle Molt Pottle who was driving the sleigh, and they would have left from Otisfield headed for Oxford High School. So that was a little, yeah. So 3 miles to Oxford, yeah. So and the other modes were walking, or if you had a horse or a buggy or whatever. And I read somewhere in all of this information that the Finnish kids tended to come on skis in the winter. That was their way of getting around, so they probably were a little better off than some that didn't know how to ski. So that's the story of that building, and it's still right there. It's not it's clapboard, it's painted blue. You've all seen it, I suspect. Okay, there's Spurs Corner. You know, they start to look an awful lot alike. I just look up and it looks really. So this is the Spurs Corner School. That's the Gore. That's the Gore. And if you went back over here, you see it's the same thing. And exactly, with the windows on the side, with 2 windows on the end, and a little portico. And, you know, if I could talk back about the East Otisfield School, because several of us went there. You don't have to change the picture, because it's the same building. But as you went in, there were outhouses, Jenny and I conferred. On the left side, Donnie remembers that the toilets were not separate from the building, but they were built off the building.
It's in the corner.
Yeah,
It wasn't built out around, off of the main structure, it was in the corner.
yeah. And we had a stove there as you walked in. And I remember my first hot lunch was in the winter, when the stove was going. They had a big sap pan that covered the whole top of the stove, and they put water in it. And we were to bring little jars of soup, and we could put them in. When we went in, we put our jars in the sap pan, and when we had lunch, we had hot lunch. Well, sometimes I think a parent would bring a pot of soup too, but usually it was just we had our own little supply or whatever. All right, so we're back to the school in Spurs Corner after the bricks. And this is the one that gets moved over to East Otisfield to be the second half of the Otisfield Central School. And I can't tell you much more about it than that, although, well, then we'll get to that in a minute. So, there goes my paperclip, where are we? These are the ones we do not have good pictures of. Oak Hill, just like it sounds, it's up on the first real rise up Oak Hill at the junction of Bishop Road, where Ann Johnstone lives out there. You go the next little road, Danny Fogg and Noreen Edwards live up there. So it was up there by Oak Hill Road, and we're not just sure right where there, but that was the area. Tamworth, if you go up Oak Hill all the way out and keep right on going, you'll be on the Tamworth Road, which will take you into Bolster's Mills. And I can't tell you much more than that exactly where it was, but it was out there. I bet it was close to Tamworth and Bolster's Mills maybe, so who knows. Bolster's Mills, don't know much about that school either, really, exactly where it was or what it looked like. I have a feeling there was a similar theme here. And Wardwell, anybody comment about that? No? The Wardwell Schoolhouse, Wardwellville or Wardwell, is still sort of there. If you go up the Bean Road and go all the way through past where John and Hazel Raymond live, and the McAllister Road goes off to the left, the Wardwell Schoolhouse was right there on the corner on the left, according to my father. It ended up on the right. It was moved around 1942 because Dad knew who bought it, and he knew when he died, so he said it had to be before that. So that old building sat there for quite a long time. It had some use, didn't it, Jean, for a while?
I honestly don't know.
Yeah. I think kids used to get in there, kind of raise hell, but, you know, because it was all open building and you could go in. And the remnants are still there. You can see an old tumble down wood unpainted schoolhouse. So that's the demise of the Wardwell Schoolhouse. And it's still barely standing. It's really not standing. It's kind of a pile now, but you can still see it. Okay, I think it's time to move to Spurs Corner School, isn't it?
Kelly, what about the Poplar Ridge School?
Oh, did I skip that? Poplar Ridge is the road that goes up to the Sisters of the Resurrection. And that was up there, but again, I don't know that we know exactly where it was up there.
I don't know.
No, we don't really know. That was a farm, a big farm up there at that point in time. I didn't know the name of the family up there, but I can't think of it. So here we are. Anything else before we go on to moving buildings? So let's go move the building. Do the next slide.
I'm sorry.
Do the next slide.
Yes.
Oh, okay, there it is. All right. So, That is you can see that it's got the same side windows, and they're bringing it, it's this longitudinal view, and they're bringing it in. We wondered where that was. Jean thought maybe it was coming up Nutting Hill, it had come from Spruce Corner. I wonder, it looks like it's come up a hill and is heading down. I don't remember where there were guard posts there. Anybody have an idea? I mean, it's got to be between Spruce Corner, where the school sat, where the fire station is now, probably on the right side of that lot. And part of the old brick building that they took down actually became some part of the very first fire station in Otisfield. Some of the brick part they used, whether they just moved the old brick building and did something with it and built the other one, don't know. But I don't really know. It could be coming, has been up Nutting Hill, it's coming down towards Bell Hill. We still have to make the sweep. And we have another, do we have two pictures? There it is. This is a little bit of a mess, right? That's the old Otisfield School. Pretty sure. That's on the right. That's where Rich St. John and Ann Pastora. That, the Spurs Corner School, was taken down behind the old Otisfield School. And so that's where the selectmen's room is now. So that's how that worked. And then they built, and I don't know if this is some building material or whatever was going on there, but they built the third wing, which is the one where the actual office part of the town office is. So that's the new, and when you go for the refreshments, there's a great big sign that says Otisfield Central School, and that was off the front of the Otisfield Central School building.
I'm sorry.
Then, this is, yeah, go ahead. So that puts them all together, and I talk about the inside of them later. So next one.
You want to go back this first?
No, go ahead.
Go ahead. Okay,
So now we have to think about going to the community hall for school. And we didn't have a good picture that we could come across easily. And so Jean decided she'd go down and take a picture. But Rich St. John showed up and he said he'd take the picture. And she said, not if I'm in it. And he said, if you're not in it, I'm not taking it. So after they got over that, they got a picture. And there's Jean. So, okay, now we can go to the inside. Okay, so this is where some of you can help. This is how I remember it. So I was there in first grade. I was here in second grade, as was Ann and others, Donnie. The front hall, as you came in the door off 121, and it's the only door I remember except in the back, this door. May not be true, but I'm not sure that, I don't know. So in the front hall was the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade students, and we could only count the pictures there, the photos, to know how many. There are 23 students in the picture, so I'm assuming that's about what they were. And here's the door that goes into these cupboards here, where the community lunch stash their supplies and things. But early on, that piece of the front hall was the Otisfield Library that the people at the Cape, Dr. and Mrs. Elliott, had built. They thought Otisfield needed a library so we could be well read. And so they provided one, and it was down in the field across from Ginny Noble's house. And at a certain point, they moved it and abutted it to the other structures. The middle hall was our grandfather's garage. The Stones owned the old store and others after that. And there was a little house beside the store, and my grandfather had a garage here across the 121. And that was, I think that was moved back away, and the library was placed on front, and then the big hall, we called it, was here. I don't remember this stage when we were young, do you? You do, Ginny? It's always been here?
When they were doing dances, it was always there.
Okay, and it had benches all the way along both sides where you sat waiting to be asked to dance, I guess. That's how that went. So those were how, and it was a little confused, you know, when you look out there, there's a big space there. I don't remember what the doors were, if they were 2 doors or sliding doors, 2 doors.
Folding doors.
Yeah, and then here, there were folding doors. That whole space, of course, is open, and they had folding doors there. They must have had doors in these 2 where there are doors now. So it was kind of, you know, 23 and 23 is 46 and 22 is 68. Put a pack of kids in here. So it was a busy place. So Barbara and I had the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. All Bean, who was just a wonderful teacher for very young children. She was marvelous. And, okay. So here are the 1st and 2nd graders. So Donnie and I were 2nd graders when we came. So this is Callie, right there. I was hoping Glennis and Gwen Henderson would come because that's Glennis, I think, and her twin sister Glenna beside her, never could tell each other apart. This is Judy Bean, my best little buddy. That's Richard Bean's sister. I could tell you all of them, but I'll tell you that this is Sandy Grover, whose grandmother was Rose Hamlin, who owned your house, Lori, and I used to go visit with her. This is Dorcas Nutting over here. Donnie, where are you? Right there. That's Donnie Vining. This is Gary Dyer's brother, Benjamin. There were 2 boys that lived at the house beside the outpost. Their parents ran the store. That's Billy Parsons. There's Stevie Wombo, I believe. And David Raymond. His people lived up on the end of the Bean Road, and the little boy was, his name was Brad, and the Raymonds were wonderful people. They took in foster children and had trouble getting them up, so and pretty well grew up with them. They were great. This is 3rd and 5th. Both my siblings are here. This is my brother Robert. Everybody knew him as Binky. This is my pretty sister Ann, who's right there. And this is Sandy Fickett Jordan, Sandy Johnny Jordan, Margaret Jackson. This is Betty Bean, Richard's other sister. This is Carol Parsons, the other little Parsons boy that lived down at the store, and across the road is Bruce Thompson. This is Helen Whittle. There's the Dyers. That is George, and that is Keith, and we've already met Benjamin. And this is Stephen. Billy, you know? Yeah. Okay. Now I know fewer people here because they were older than me, so Ginny may have to help. This is Christine Pico, Longley, teacher, Stella Edwards. Ginny, isn't that your brother Norman?
Looks very much like him.
Yes. That's Anita Jacola Washburn. Lives up on Bell Hill in summer. Is that June Wiley?
Looks like June.
Yep.
Connie Butler.
Connie Butler. Best I can do. Yeah. Okay. So when we went back to the Otisfield Central School, the new school, 1st and 2nd grade was in the new building to the far left, and 3rd, 4th, and 5th was in Ann Pastor and Rich St. John's office space. And the big kids, we called them, 6th, 7th, and 8th grades were down in what's now the. So that's the story of Otisfield